What's up guys, welcome back to a brand new episode here at Eisei-en. I thought for this particular episode we would do our annual fall walkthrough of the nursery, show you our latest projects here, the fall color in the garden, and just kind of the general goings on at the nursery at this time of year. Now before we get started, I do want to say that we are doing this video in conjunction with Bonsai Mais, so go down to the description box down below, hop over to their YouTube channel, subscribe to them, give them some likes, show them some love, and let them know that we sent you. Now without further ado, let's hop into the nursery here and take a look at what's going on at Eisei-en. Okay, so the first tree I want to show you guys here is this awesome semi-cascade Japanese black pine right behind me here. Now this particular tree is a client's tree. The client brought it here for me to style up this last week. We changed the angle a little bit on the plant and I detailed out the branches. We had actually talked about potentially doing a wedge cut in the trunk to bend it a little bit closer so that the foliage was actually closer to the base of the tree. But after assessing the risk versus the reward of that, we decided not to put the wedge cut in there and just design it as is. And I actually think it turned out really, really nicely. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Now the second tree I want to show you here is another Japanese black pine. This is one that was obviously imported from Japan a number of years ago. I actually think it's probably the best chuhin or medium-sized Japanese black pine in all of the United States. It has an amazing base to it, perfect taper, beautiful movement, no scarring on the trunk, and very thin branches. It's nearly impossible to create something like that, and I have no idea how the original creators of this tree actually pulled it off. But we've been maintaining it here at the garden for the last 3 years or so, and it's almost at a point where it's ready for the US National Show. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that in a couple of years it'll be in peak form. We'll have it in a better pot that it's in right now, and it'll be ready for that exhibition. All right, so let's make our way into the workshop and I'll show you the project that I'm going to be working on today actually, and that is this giant literati limber pine behind me here. Now we've actually had this tree at the garden for a number of years. We have been working on it during that period, just getting it kind of settled into its current pot. As a matter of fact, it was potted in here about 1.5 years ago, and we've just basically been letting it sit, trying to get it healthy over the last 2 growing seasons. Well, now it's in a state to actually be styled up, and I'm going to be styling it today for Bonsai-U, which is our online bonsai learning platform. So if you're interested in learning how to build bonsai projects, how to take care of your trees horticulturally, what to do to your trees at different stages throughout the year, please consider subscribing to Bonsai-U. There'll be a link in the description down below. It's a monthly subscription platform, and we put out new demonstrations and do live Q&As with you guys several times a month. So definitely check that out if you're interested. Okay, so this tree right behind me here is one of our upcoming projects that we're going to be styling in the next couple of weeks. This is an Itoigawashimpaku that was imported from Japan. You can see just how spectacular the trunk is on this tree. I mean, that deadwood is unbelievable. Now, I have a feeling that this tree is probably a Tohoku Shinpaku, meaning that it was collected in the northern part of Japan in Tohoku Prefecture, and then grafted with this very fine foliage. This particular foliage looks to me like the cultivar that Mr. Iura grafts onto most of his trees in Obuse. So I have a feeling that this tree actually went through his nursery at one point and he actually grafted this on here. So it's an honor, of course, to have this kind of material at my garden here in Nashville, Tennessee. You know, when I moved back from Japan, I never expected to be able to get my hands on this kind of material in the United States, but it's really nice that people have entrusted me to actually work on trees of this caliber here. So we'll be posting updates on this tree as we style it out over the next couple of weeks, so be on the lookout for that. All right, so the next tree I want to show you here is this chuhin Shinpaku juniper. This is actually an Itoigawa that was collected in the mountains in Niigata Prefecture, probably from Mount Kurohime, which is the most famous of all mountains in Japan for Itoigawashimpaku. It was originally imported by a client of mine who purchased it directly from Shinji Suzuki in Obuse, Japan, which is near Nagano. Now, this particular tree has fantastic movement, beautiful lines within the trunk. The interplay of the live vein and the deadwood is absolutely spectacular. And over the last few years, the tree has had a few branches kind of die off here and there. But when the tree was brought to us here at Eisei-en, we took what we had left, compacted it, and built the tree that you see here. But very excited about the future of this plant. I think it has a very good potential future going into exhibitions in the United States at some point. All right, next up on the list here is this awesome medium-sized Japanese white pine. Now, this particular tree obviously was also imported from Japan, but what's special about this plant is that it's not the typical white pine that gets imported. Most of those trees are what are called Setsugoya or Miyajima white pine, meaning that it's white pine foliage grafted on Japanese black pine rootstock. Well, this particular tree is Pinus parviflora on its own roots. So the foliage is a little bit softer in both texture and coloration. And these trees actually tend to be a little bit more difficult to maintain because the root systems of Pinus parviflora are a little bit less stable than Pinus lumbergii or Japanese black pine. So maintaining this tree, keeping it a little bit on the dry side is absolutely necessary in maintaining its health. But really excited about how this tree turned out. Just wired it up a couple of weeks ago. And I think that, again, this one has a pretty good future here in the US. All right, so one of my favorite things to do here at Eisei-en is take some of our native US material and graft it with better foliage. Now, the tree right behind me here on the rock is one such tree. This is a Rocky Mountain juniper trunk that has been grafted with Itoigawa foliage. Now, I should say here that I don't graft everything here. I do like working with some of the native foliage that we have in the United States, but if the foliage is so bad that even if it's cultivated, it can never get really good, I will graft it and change it out, which is what we've done with this particular tree here. Now, initially, this tree actually had 3 live veins on it. The very first year that we brought it to the garden, one of those live veins ended up dying because the tree was infected with something called phomopsis or tip blight. Even though it was treated, there was no way really to bring that live vein back to life. It just kind of petered out. We then grafted the remaining 2 live veins. All of the grafts took. We actually did that in one of our intensive classes here at the nursery. And we started styling and developing this tree last year. Well, in the spring of this year, we had terrible weather. It got very, very cool for an extended period of time. It was very wet and very rainy. And even though we spray preventively here at the garden, on occasion, we do lose things like branches or apexes, or in the case of this tree, one of the live veins. So we went from 3 live veins down to 1 live vein, but I still think the tree looks pretty spectacular. What do you guys think? Okay, so for those of you who have been following my channel here at Eisei-en for a number of years, you will know that I love big bonsai. And this tree right behind me here is one such tree. This is a 1C juniper that was collected by a buddy of mine, Richard Lee, out in the Four Corners area of New Mexico. It is, I would say, probably the second biggest tree that we have at the nursery here. But, as you can see, it's got spectacular deadwood, pretty crazy movement to the trunk, and the foliage is actually quite nice on this species. This is actually one native juniper that I would recommend not grafting because the foliage actually tightens up very quickly and you can get it to pad out in a short amount of time. So we actually styled this tree up in one of our recent intensive classes. When we have our students come in, sometimes they bring their own material, sometimes they work on our material here at Eisei-en. And of course, I let them work on our crazy good and large trees because I want it to feel kind of like a mini apprenticeship. So some of the students here and myself, we got together, styled this tree up, and I actually think it turned out pretty nicely. But it does need a number of years to really pad out and look good, but I think we've got a good start to this tree. Okay, so of course here at Eisei-en, we don't just work with coniferous material, we do have a lot of deciduous trees and broadleaf evergreens as well. So this tree right behind me here is an Arakawa Japanese maple. This was originally an air layer that was done over at Brussels Bonsai Nursery in Olive Branch, Mississippi. As you can see, it's got a fantastic base, beautiful movement to the trunk. We're working on developing the ramification here, but the fall color at this time of year is absolutely spectacular. Now, if it were a little bit sunny here, we'd be able to film with the light kind of filtering through the leaves, but it is a bit of an overcast day here. But in any case, I wanted to show you one of our trees here that is currently in full fall color. So I mentioned earlier that we had a bit of a strange spring in terms of the weather, and that weird weather has actually continued throughout the growing season into the fall. Normally we get pretty cool here in October, but this year it stayed hot the entire month. So we really haven't had any low temperatures to induce much fall color at the nursery. So the trees right behind me here are all Trident Maples that were imported from Japan a number of years ago. Obviously, none of them have really changed colors at this point. They're just now barely starting to reabsorb that chlorophyll, and you're starting to see some yellows, a little bit of reds, maybe some oranges there as well. But in another probably 10 to 14 days or so, they'll be in full fall color. So we'll probably do an update again at that point to show you what they look like. But just wanted to show you some of our really cool Trident maples that we've been developing here for the last number of years. Okay, so the last tree I want to show you here in this episode is this giant Rocky Mountain juniper behind me here. This was collected by Dan and Steve from Backcountry Bonsai, and Steve actually delivered it here just a couple of weeks ago. It's one of the best, if not the best, Rockies that I have ever seen. It has an amazing trunk line to it, absolutely killer deadwood, and relatively good foliage, but not the best. And as a matter of fact, you can see just how wide the tree is. There really isn't any interior foliage on the plant, so I'm actually thinking about grafting this tree this coming spring. Now, this particular tree was collected just a few months ago, so by the time we graft it in, let's say, late February, early March this coming year, it won't even have been out of the ground for a full year. But because the tree is so healthy, I don't think that's going to be that big a deal. So we're going to find either better Rocky Mountain juniper foliage to graft on here or something like Itoigawa, which would actually be my preference. I think this trunk with the tightest Itoigawa foliage that I can get my hands on, grafted all over it, is going to be an absolutely spectacular tree. So I'd like to know what you guys think in the comments down below. Would you graft this tree or would you keep the original foliage, and why? All right, guys, so that's going to do it for this episode here at Eisei-en. I hope you enjoyed the fall walkthrough at the nursery and seeing some of the projects that we're currently working on. Once again, make sure to go down to the description box down below, hop over to Bonsai Mais channel, subscribe, like their stuff, and let them know that we sent you. And if you're interested again in learning more about how to build bonsai, click on that Bonsai-U subscription link down below and check out the content there. So thank you so much for checking out this episode, and I look forward to seeing all of you guys next time around. Take care.